All right, well, welcome everybody to our March free fly tying event here at Tailwater Outfitters. I'm Dave. I do a lot of our online tying videos, but I also help out around here in the shop. So those of you that might not know me, I've got a little bit of a technical difficulty already right now with my bobbin here, so let me fix that. So I apologize.
Good start.
Yeah, it's a good start. We're off to a solid start. So yeah, anybody who's online, feel free to type in a question or anything like that, or you got a comment. Please try not to heckle me too much. You know, I do have feelings, but I'll act like I'm tough, but I'll cry in my pillow later tonight. But for the most part, we're just going to do what we normally do here. We've done, Brandon, how long we've been doing fly tie night at Tailwater? Since this place has existed, pretty much? We're going on 6 years, roughly, something like that.
2017.
Yeah.
I don't know if I went to the first one.
Yeah, but so it's been more than a minute.
Previous to my employment.
Rest in peace.
Yeah. So yeah, been a while, but we thought we would go ahead and jump on the internet and just see how that goes, and share it with more than just the group. But yeah. So enough about that. Tonight we're gonna get started. We're gonna plan on really doing two flies. The first one is what we call the flats worm. We tie it tonight. We're going to use some colors that are targeted at redfish, but really, I mean, this is a great bonefish, triggerfish. It's really intended to get a little worm pattern out there, like little bristle worms or marine worms, or I'm not a marine biologist, but little creepy crawlers that exist on the flats that maybe as fly fishermen we don't always think about. And we've had some pretty good success with this. So it's one of our shop favorites. What you see right here is just a basic tan. But tonight we're going to tie it in a black and purple, which has done really well for redfish. The hook we're using is the Gamakatsu SL11 3H. So classic hook. It's been around for quite a while. Does not have a huge hook gape or gap, depending where you are from in the world. How you pronounce that? Gape. There you go. All right, so we're just going to start a thread base. We don't need to go the whole hook shank yet, because we're going to start off by putting in some bead chain eyes. Bead chain eyes I'm going to use tonight are... Actually, I held up the wrong pack. And size 6 is the hook we're using of that SL11 3H. And just because we want to be fancy with our black and purple, we're using sight cast bead chain, and they got a bunch of different colors. It's a cool way to add a little extra flair to what you're tying. And I'll preface up front tonight that I have an allergy thing that's kicking off, so every now and then I need to cough. So I apologize if I'm coughing. I'm not patient zero in the movie Outbreak or anything like that. I just have this pollen or something's getting me. So once we've got some thread started, we're going to lay down a little bit of bead chain with some X-wraps. And I'm going to keep it, you know, that as you look, you'll see about the width of the bead chain itself back. So 1/8 of an inch or so. We want to leave a little bit of room at the end for a weed guard. Not much happens forward of this bead chain on this fly, but we want to go ahead and leave ourselves a little bit of space so that we can get our weed guard in, and then also whip finish, etc. You rarely gain much by crowding the hook eye. Okay, so we'll do some thread wraps back towards the bend of the hook. And maybe just a little bit up the bend, not much. Next, we're going to use a piece of chenille. Tonight, I selected a thinner size of standard chenille. Happens to be black. And one of our other patterns, we're going to use the medium chenille. And I've tied this with both. We're going to use the skinnier stuff tonight just because the hook size is a little smaller. And so once we're set there, I'm going to take this piece of chenille, and I want at least 1 inch out the back, and there's going to be plenty here. And it's okay if we have a tiny bit of bulk here. We don't want to make this a real bulky fly, but if there's a little bit that we build up, that's okay. And then I'm going to trim off to roughly an inch. And to make a real nice taper, I'm just going to take a lighter and hit it real quick. So it's got a real nice taper there. Maybe Adam, if you don't mind, you can pass that out to the group so there's another lighter going around. And this particular chenille I pulled out of the package is kind of bumpy, bubbly. I don't know. It's kind of weird. Actually, when I first looked at it, I was like, man, I don't like those imperfections. But those little imperfections actually probably make it better because, you know, Mother Nature's not perfectly geometrical and square cuts and things like that. So that's probably a good thing, really. The next thing we're going to tie in is some midge flash. This is diamond midge flash. If you have some crystal flash, polar flash, all the shiny stuff that you probably already have, you could use that. It doesn't have to be this exact stuff. But we're going to tie that in next. And then also some medium vinyl D-rib. So we're kind of building part of a crazy Charlie here. So I'm going to start with tying in this midge flash right behind the bead chain eyes, real close to it. And then I'm going to tie it, bring my thread right back to the bend of the hook again. So we've really got that secured in there. And then the next thing I'm going to do is grab this vinyl D-rib. So the reason it's called D-rib is that it's curved on one side and flat on the other. And so ideally here, we want and it's difficult to perceive what's the curved side and what's the flat side. So I'm going to try to have the flat, and the best way I can tell you is as I just kind of pull it through my fingers and I can feel one side that's flat and one side that's curved. And then I'm going to tie it with the flat side up, not against the hook. So it seems a little counterintuitive when I'm first tying it in. So there we go. And I'm going to capture just a tiny bit of it. It's vinyl, so it'll squish down real tight for you. So when I've got those two materials tied in, I'm going to advance my thread back up to the front here, and I'm going to leave it just behind the bead chain. So I know there's a bunch going on there. So when you get done, you'll have really 3 tails tied in. Our chenille, this flash, and the D-rib. The D-rib I'm now going to take and I'm going to palmer it around the shank all the way up to the bead chain eyes. The only real thing that I'm trying to accomplish right now is touching wraps so that as I go forward, I'm going to turn my hook shank that's now got black thread on it. I want it to be sparkly purple. And with the vinyl D-rib, not to say it doesn't matter, but if you tie it in the wrong way, it's going to be okay. The sun is still going to set in the west tonight. It's going to rise in the east. We'll be okay. The fish just won't eat your fly. But we joke around here in the Tampa area that the redfish hate us anyway. But really what that is doing is when we do get ready to palmer on our vinyl D-rib, we want that bumped or the D side sticking out, and it'll give that kind of segmented worm body to it. So I've got that tied off now. After I've palmered all of our flash on, the next thing will be that D-rib. And I'm going to do the similar thing that I just did with the midge flash. If you prefer to spin your vise or want to palmer it by hand, I've always just been a palmer by hand guy. It's just how I am. And I'm going to start there at the beginning and all the way up to the eyes. This D-rib stuff, this is clear. That's all I stock in the shop right now, but you can get it in all kinds of colors, smoky, red, whatever. But I really like working with the vinyl that's clear. You know, if there was a need for us to carry more, I would, but this really seems to suit us well in the saltwater world, at least. And so there we go. So I've got a pretty good segmented body there. When I trim off the vinyl, and also for my midge, I usually cut it right in between the bead chain, and so when this fly is in the water being fished, it's going to be hidden on the bottom. So everybody has little blemishes in their ties to some degree, and sometimes it's where you just leave your little blemish. You can kind of hide it, so to speak. All right, so we're getting pretty well done with this fly. We're not quite there. And you know, this is probably fishable like it is, but one of the things that when we were coming up with this pattern that we really wanted this fly to be was very stealthy in its delivery. So we wanted it to land really soft. So in these winter days when the water's super clear and the redfish see us from like 2 zip codes away, and we got to make a longer cast, hopefully a shorter one, but we wanted it to really land soft. So what I came up with, and we tested a few versions of this fly, is we're going to use some 1-inch tarantula brush from EP. As you all know, I've been trying to introduce this all to a little bit more using dubbing loops, and I use them in a lot of our patterns, and you could obviously make this material out of dubbing loops, but the EP brush is really consistent. It's a great product, and we're not going to use a lot of it on this fly. So if you got a little bit laying around already, you'll see that it's not going to take much. So I think I gave everybody here roughly a quarter of each brush. All we're going to do is we're going to tie this in just at the back of our bead chain eyes, okay? And so, excuse me, so you can get a pretty good view there. And you remember when we did our X wraps for our bead chain, that's what we're going to do with this tarantula brush. We're going to do 1 X around the bead chain, and then we're going to tie it off in front of it. Because I want to add some fluff to this fly so that when it hits the water, it'll hit a little softer, maybe sink a slight bit slower. And that's it. I'm not really looking to add a big giant poofy part on it so it looks like I don't know, like a dandelion or something that's the seeds are ready to fly away. So the idea is there's one part. And so 1 series of X wraps. Sometimes it's hard to find the wire down in there. So what I like to do is just get your bodkin, because really what we want to tie in is just the wire and not trap too many unnecessary materials at the same time. One, your tie-in won't be as good, but it's also going to mat down all the goodness that you're paying for on these brushes. So that's pretty good right there.
Would you come between the eyes?
Yeah, so what I did is I went between the eyes to make the first part of the X, and then I went under and then through the eyes again to make an X. Yeah, there's not a lot of room in there. And now this is just me being a little bit semi-crazy, but I'm gonna go ahead and get some of this fuzz out away from my hook eye now. Let me put some friction on the vise, and very carefully I'm just gonna burn some of this away. There we go. For the weed guard, you know, you can tie it in whether you want a double weed guard or single. I usually do single on this just to keep it real kind of small. the way that I like to do my single weed guards, this is a 20-pound, it might be 25-pound hard mason. These Xuron pliers from EP are great. Yeah, you could get away with some other like needle nodes that have a real good flat spot on them. But these are awesome because when you, and I'm just going to do the very front part of it here and squeeze them down, it makes a really great flat spot. If you're putting shrimp eyes or something on another pattern, these are great. And I'm not going to need all of this. I'll just demo real quick. You can put a flat spot in them, and then when you tie them in, you don't need to add super glue or anything because you got that real nice little valley that was created. So it really locks them in. But I've got my flat spot on the end. Give it a handful of good solid wraps. I'm going to go a couple times behind to stand it up. Tied that in pretty solid. And then I can whip finish. So we're pretty much done with our tie. If you want to, you can finish it off with a little bit of resin or head cement, whatever, Sally Hansen's. And we could have done a double weed guard on that. Whatever your favorite is, that's cool. I will take a comb or a brush of some kind and just make sure that I've got this all fluffed out. And the last thing really I'm going to do to this is trim it. It's one of the easiest trims you can do for a fly is I'm just going to make sure it's flat on the bottom. So it'll once it gets hook point up, it should ride a little better on the bottom. And so we've got our worm out the back with a segmented sparkly body. You can see this first one that I had in the vise. I'm using, instead of standard chenille, this is medium, which works out really well too. And then I use some gold in there because, hey, it's redfish. Why wouldn't I use some gold? And again, this particular chenille has some imperfections in it, but actually I think that's pretty nice. I think it would stand out well. And that's the flatworm fly right there. We've had a lot of success with that on spooky redfish around here. Yeah. Yeah, so while everybody's finishing up here in the shop, we've kind of talked about this pattern a fair bit, about why it was designed, that sort of stuff. I'll talk about our next fly we're going to do. It's actually a pretty well-known pattern. I would argue that everybody's heard of it for the most part. If you haven't, then you were about to, so I guess you learned here. But just an absolute classic of a pattern is the strong arm merkin. And in some ways I would argue, misunderstood fly in that to understand how it works is pretty darn important, obviously to fish it, but certainly to make this. So the idea, and it was really developed around permit fishing. They work in reds as well. But one of the cool things about this fly is the claw is very rigid. And I can't stress the importance of this enough. And what it acts like is really as a rudder. Both for if you strip it, if we were like this and it's going to keel out and make it go straight all the time. But really, one of the more important things is when this fly hits the water in whatever attitude it's at, this arm sticking, excuse me, not straight out from our hook tip, but angled a little bit, will cause it to immediately right every time and then go to the bottom. And obviously, if you're fishing a crab pattern, that hook point has to be up every single time. If you get it on the bottom and you're just in the mud and sticks and who knows what else. So the importance of that cannot be stressed enough. So yeah, we'll get started with it here shortly. We are going to do a slightly modified version of this. It's just how I've been tying it. We will tie the claw exactly like that. We'll use some different materials in the transition section, as I like to call it, from the crab to the claw itself. Gives it kind of that nice teardrop shape. But everything forward here, we will do the same. This is Aunt Lydia's yarn. It came out of the carpet industry in the 70s and 80s. It's not manufactured anymore, but fly shops around the country, a lot of them do carry it. They have to source it themselves. And then we'll have some rubber legs in here, crazy legs, whatever you want to call them, and a little bit of weight in the front via some dumbbell eyes. So we're going to transition to our second fly for those that are here in the shop. And I guess I'll mention too real quick. You know, for the Merkin, what Dave does, not this Dave, the Dave Skoke, the guy that really knows what he's doing with this fly. He uses a blend of some Aunt Lydia's carpet yarn and some rabbit hair, and he makes a dubbing loop. And then he also has, if I remember correctly, I'm pretty sure he uses a hen saddle to as well. And for us today, what we're going to use is a little bit of rabbit strip. We're just going to tie in some clumps, and then we will palmer in some hen saddle. So we'll get it going on those specifics here as we move ahead. Thread choice is up to you, but our pattern overall is going to be kind of a darker brown. And the reason we're using darker brown tonight is because the hen saddle that I had here at the shop is a dark brown color, so like a chocolate color. So that's the main reason. But I will say, right now in my permit fly box, almost all of mine are white and tans and maybe the brown, but nothing dark. So this is a good addition, at least selfishly for me. The hook we're going to use is the SL11 3H in a size 2. So you all should have one of those. And when we put it in the vise, we are going to work around the bend of this hook a little bit. Right now, I'm still going to put my hook in the vise with the shank level. We might move it around a little bit as we move ahead. So we'll get started with a thread base. And first thing we're going to do is put in some lead eyes. The ones we're using tonight happen to be plain lead presentation eyes. Size 3 from Hairline, so it's, I can't remember what the weight is. It's a 1/40th of an ounce. There you go. It's on the package for me. The eyes that you use as far as color or anything like that really don't matter. I don't have it with me here, but really when you tie this, and I know that Dave's done this, because permit are essentially just a big swimming eyeball, and they really look hard at stuff. You may not want to have a brightly colored dumbbell eye that sticks out that's a different color. So one of the tricks is, and I have some of different colors here, is I'll use some fingernail polish. I'll do up a whole bunch of dumbbells and cut them off, do it assembly line style, and then I'll use fingernail polish and paint them and let them dry. And it dries pretty quick. Ask before you go raiding your significant other's stash of fingernail polish. But it's pretty cheap stuff. And so I'm going to put these dumbbells pretty close to the front. Just like our last fly, the only thing I really need to get in front of this is going to be the weed guard and my whip finish. So just like every other time we've put bead chain or dumbbell eyes on, we're using lead, or we're using our X wraps, followed by a series of under wraps. And I didn't really mention it, but one of the tricks to really getting secure eyes on there is, yeah, some people use super glue and stuff like that. But put a healthy thread base down. It's kind of a cushion or a pillow. We can't compress the steel of the hook shank. The lead arguably will compress some, but not appreciably in fly tying. So the idea is that if we put a thick layer of thread in, we can squeeze that. And as we do our X wraps and then our under wraps or parachute wraps, we can squeeze that thread down and make it tighter and tighter and tighter And these eyes are solid. I mean, I could put some super glue on them, but it's honestly not going to do much for me. So it sounds like we might have some questions coming with the online chat. So I'm going to be relying on Adam to help me out there. And now I'm going to advance my thread back into the hook bend a little bit. Oh, I'm getting sloppy here.
You're good, Dave.
Okay.
Just a reminder.
Yep. Because when we tie in our claw, it's not going to go straight out the back. We want it to be at an angle for really, I think, two reasons. One, we want our claw to stick up in the air, but the other one is by having an angle that helps the fly when it hits sideways to immediately right, which is one of the main attributes of this fly. All right, so I'm just going to thicken up my thread wraps in the center part of my fly there. So now that we've done that, we're going to make the claw. The claw is a piece of medium chenille. In this case, it's brown. And, you'll cut out a 5-inch piece or something like that. It is nicer when you have a lighter color because you can really use markers or paint or even fingernail polish to give it a real hot tip. Like if I had a bright orange paint or something, that would make these tips really stand out. And you can see that's what Dave did on his here. So it'll be a little tougher for us to do that here. I think using red might show some, but again, it's not critical. So I've got this piece of medium chenille, and I'm going to do an overhand knot. Just a simple overhand knot, and try to do it kind of towards the end, something like that. I haven't pulled it tight. The tip of the loop to the base of the knot is 1/2 inch, so that gives you a little bit of a scale. I'm going to pull it down nice and snug so it's not going anywhere. And Tom, if you don't mind, could you grab, if you see one of those lighters out there and bring it up to me, please? So the once we've gotten our overhand knot, thank you, appreciate it. Once we've done that, looks like this side is going to be my top of my claw. How do I know that? I mean, it's literally because I'm going to make it that way, but you can start off by doing a cut just straight ahead.
Doesn't look like an overhand knot.
Yep, it's an overhand knot. I just pulled it down in a little tighter there.
Oh, you fold the material in half?
In half and do an overhand knot, yes. My apologies. If I didn't mention that we folded it in half.
All in the detail.
It's in the details. Hey, words have meaning. Use the right ones, Dave. It's fair. Fair enough. So I'm going to end up with something like this. And that's okay, but most claws are, one pincer is a little longer than the other. So because if I'm lucky, I'll get this in front of a permit someday. I'm going to trim one a little bit shorter. Not a lot. I mean, maybe 1/8 of an inch at the most. But that's the idea, something like that. And then we'll hit it with a lighter and really give it that pointed look. And it'll kind of melt the some of the chenille as well. And it's a little bit of a, until you've done this a few times, you might make one of these and you'll have some throwaways in there. So there we go. This is still a floppy claw. I mean, it looks nice, but if I were to just tie this on and leave this, arguably the fly is worthless, I would argue. I've got this lighter is going to be right up here. If anybody needs it, please come grab it. So we're going to get ready to put our claw on. And you can see one side's longer than the other. Because this fly is upside down right now, I prefer when the bigger part of the claw is on the top. So if I was fishing this, it would be like this. So I'm going to invert it. And how far out it sticks out the back is up to you, but really, I think about the total length of the claw that you see in before the knot, I do about the same behind it. And that looks pretty good-ish. And I'm going to give it a couple wraps to just see that's going to work out. And go back to my pointer here. So here's our tie-in point right now, but I have a thread base a little bit through the bend of the hook. If you remember when we first laid down our thread, I'm going to tie in my claw because I want it to have some to angle upward, or in this case downward, because the fly is inverted. So give it some healthy wraps there, and then come right back. The tag ends here that are free, we'll just go ahead and trim those out. And Adam, if there's any online questions, I thought I saw a message from you that we might have some. Feel free to let me know. And
Will do. All good right now.
all right, cool. All right.
Ask away though.
Instructions can't be that terrible then, or if you got just a general comment or a heckle, bring it as well. All right, so our next major function once our claw is in position is we got to stiffen this thing. I know I sound like a broken record talking about that, but honestly, that's one of the most key attributes of this fly, and a lot of places don't do it, or really probably don't do it all that well. You can use super glue. That'll stiffen it up. My preference is to use some resin. I'm going to use some Loon thick. I could use some thin, whatever, but I've got some thick that this bottle probably should have been stored upside down so that I won't have to wait forever to get it out. So I'll tell you what I'm going to do in the interest of time here. So I'm going to use some thin resin, but I'm going to use it off of my bodkin because I inadvertently zapped my tip the other day. So it's permanently closed right now. And so, yeah, I did that. So what I'm going to do is just take my bodkin, stick it in the bottle, and I'm going to go a little bit old school here. So, and hopefully y'all can see this. I definitely want to get this area right down towards my thread wraps, a little bit onto the knob, and then I really like to get the...
So you're getting it soaking wet.
Yep, kind of just almost like butter on an English muffin. We don't need to go crazy, but we want to make sure that there's a healthy amount of the stuff on here.
Okay, I got it.
There should be at least some super glue. There's that right there in the front.
That's thick. And then
It will also work. The resin, what I like about the resin is,
the whole thing?
yep, so we're doing the whole claw,
The whole thing.
the whole arm to the thread, and then I'm going to pull it real straight in line with the hook shank and at a little bit of an angle. And we'll zap this. And I know we all get in a rush, but most manufacturers talk about, at least 20 seconds doing this. So really make sure that it's on there. And that's pretty stiff. I will say, I've noticed recently, a lot of times I'll make sure my thread's out of the way, and I'll give it just a tiny bit more where it actually meets the thread. And that's because you can stiffen the whole claw, but it needs to be kind of rigid with the hook. Otherwise, you end up with the claw moving around independently of the hook, and we want to kind of fuse it as all one. So I'm going with just a little bit more on there. Again, it's in great position. But your fly, once you're happy with how it is, and that is rock solid. That right there is going to work out real well. Cool. And I guess I'll just try to demo this a little bit here. Take it out of the hook, or out of the vise. I mean, when I grab this thing, it's not going anywhere. And there's that angle. So it comes up straight, has the angle. Key feature. All right. All right, next. So we've got our kind of base set up. We got our claw built, assembled, installed, and stiffened on there. Next, we're going to work on this kind of transition area that I talked about before. And one of the ways that I found that was, quote, good enough for me, and I've kind of been able to repeatability is pretty important when I tie, especially if it's something that's for a customer or somebody here in the shop. You know, when they get one of these flies, I want it to be the same every single time if I can help it. So one of the ways I came up with is I have a lot of rabbit magnum strip around from doing tarpon flies, and so what I like about working off of these zonker strips and the like is the width is pretty constant. So I know that if that's constant and I pull down roughly the same amount, in this case 3/8 of an inch roughly, then the amount of material I'm putting on the fly every time is the same, or as close as I can get it. So this is a Magnum Rabbit strip. This happens to be a gold variant, again, because I just want to stick with this brown to dark brown coloration. And we, really, we could build a dubbing loop, lay all this material in, would really be kind of the classic or way to do this. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to pinch this material off, and I'm just going to cut it off the hide. And so now I have a whole bunch of rabbit fur that's not attached to anything. And I'm going to set it down so that the tips of the rabbit fur are just about at the knot that forms my claw. And I'm going to take this and I'm going to just wrap it around the hook. Almost like when you're tying bucktail in the round. You know, you set it on. You could just tie it there, but then you want it to spread around the hook. So that's what I'm doing here. And if we have a bare spot, then we'll just trim off a little more. Like I got a bare spot on the top, which is arguably the most important area. So I just did that, no big deal. I'll grab a tiny clump here. Invert my fly, align my tips. That looks good. Pretty happy with that. And I'm just going to trim off some of these butt sections. All of this is going to get covered up, but I don't want to unnecessarily add bulk to the fly, honestly, just by being lazy. There's really no reason for that. And I just pulled some of this out, but it's actually from an area that is pretty well set up, so I'm not going to worry about it. And now I'll put some wraps on that. It's just rabbit fur, so there's not a whole lot going on there as far as bulk. Looks good.
If I was watching the stream, I would type in the chat, Ricky move.
Yeah. Hey, it's a workaround if dubbing loops are scary to you or just like they're so complex. I always dork them up. I've heard that those people are out there. None of them would possibly be here tonight.
That's why they make brush material.
There you go. And that's one of the reasons that people find brushes. So, I mean, they're convenient. They're not inexpensive, but you're paying for somebody else to do all that work for you. So,
I like using it now.
dubbing loops are a lot cheaper. So, and you know what? I don't think anybody would argue this point. It's a relatively basic tying skill that is definitely worth your time to master. So we're going to work around it tonight. So we have a couple of feathers that I gave you all. This is it's a hen saddle. This is whiting. This is a really old one. It's so old that the price tag on it says $8.50. So I'm pretty sure this came over on the Mayflower. I mean, this thing is old, but it's in good shape. And and what we're going to do is we're going to palmer some of this on. And what's interesting is the part that we're going to focus in on this is not this outer part, the webby area with the tips. We're actually going to get into some of this kind of funky I'm sure there's a technical term for it, but it escapes me off the top of my head. And we're going to put 2, maybe 3 turns to kind of add to this rabbit. Because you could see if we had the body of this fly and then just that rabbit, it's going to slick down to nothing. We want something that's a little more streamlined than that. So I'm going to do 2 at once. So when I pair these 2 together, I don't care about the stems or the tips. I'm going to match up that transition area that you see. And we're not making kitchen cabinets here right now. It doesn't have to be super precise, but get it kind of close. Okay? And then I'm going to, just with my fingers, peel off some of this towards the stems. And I probably really only need about 3/4 of an inch of this material that I'm after. This stuff can get a little brittle, and it's only but so bendy. So that's one of the reasons I'm staying away from this portion of the stem. Is if I go to palmer it right here, it's going to crack and split on me.
Okay.
Yes.
You got one like marabou,
Yep.
one regular feather.
Yeah. So we kind of want the more like what looks like marabou.
Okay.
Okay. If you need another piece, feel free to grab one from the box or ask Tom. Tom will help you out. Tom's a heck of a guy. He doesn't mind. So that's what we're after. And usually what I'll do is,
My question, this is,
and I'm sorry for the people online. One of our tires had one piece that didn't have much of the feather part. It was mostly just what kind of resembles marabou. The marabou part is what we're after, really, not the feather proper. So, because when we palmer this, we're going to use really just this stuff. So now I'm going to tie this in here, couple wraps, and these other stems are just going to come out of here. And I like to do 2 at once and just, well, my stems broke, came off on me. So we'll just adjust fire. Yeah, and a lot of times we do use the tips. We're just after this stuff down here. Get my thread out of the way. And we're just going to go around. There's 2, and I'll do 3. And that's going to, actually 2 is probably going to be plenty. So I'll get my thread back up here. And all we did was, instead of palmering with a brush like on our last fly, we just used a feather. And it may have been a little on the long side, but our claws still stick out of there, so we're good. The remaining part of this fly is going to be pretty repetitive. And it's really, as far as we're going to create the body. And we're going to use some, that Aunt Lydia's yarn that we talked about earlier. We have some here in the shop. These colors, the colors are the same names that are used by Aunt Lydia's all those years ago. This one happens to be Spice for a lighter color, and then Wood Brown for our darker brown. And everybody has, 2 length of each of those colors here. And what I've done is I've just cut them up in about 1-inch pieces. So I've got like 4 of one and 5 of the other, or something like that. And then I'm going to start with a darker color, just because my collar is a darker color. And if you've ever done crab bodies before, you can use EP fibers, for example. EP fiber is great doing this. One of the, quote, downsides for consistency is that when you pull out your EP, you have to have the same amount. So the yarn makes sure that it's always the same amount. So it's pretty convenient in that regard. And I'm gonna kind of turn the vise here a little bit so hopefully you can see it better here. Is I'm gonna lay this yarn in, and then with my thread, I'm gonna do some X wraps over it. Me personally, I like to do one X, and then I'll do a second one over. So I'm gonna turn it back upright for myself, and I like to use the first X to just get it on the shank, and then I can position it.
I won't tie these wide enough for my legs to go on.
Yeah, and I know it's not everybody's favorite.
I don't blame you.
And so I've got one, and so I always feel like the first X is to position it, and the second one is to secure it. It's kind of how I feel. So, but one nice thing is if I really want to position this, once it's in, is I can grab this and kind of wiggle it around, and it will reposition for you. So I've got that one in, I think. Stay right there, you sucker. And then I like to do at least 1 or 2 wraps in front of it. And because that's so much fun, I can tell by all of the jubilation and cries and jeers or hurrahs from the crowd. We're going to do that a bunch of times more. So I'm just going to alternate colors. I'm going dark brown, and then I'm going to this tan color. So tan color 1.
You cut them about an inch.
Yeah, roughly an inch. I'll wiggle it up tight to the previous one, snug it down, do another X. This is definitely frustrating the first few times you do it. And you get this weird, your fingers just kind of figure it out, the pressures you're applying with thread. And it will turn out quite nice. I mean, I don't know, 3 weeks ago or something, we had a customer that had a short notice trip going for permit, and they needed a lot of these, 18 of them, certain colors, and they needed them like in 2 days. And so I did this a whole bunch. That's cool. It's fine.
Lost some sleep over that one?
I like tying. It was a short notice, so yeah, it was a pretty good ask. But you know, I like a challenge, I suppose. And I'm just gonna keep alternating colors. It's okay if you're falling behind a little bit. There is some stuff at the end of this, but we'll stay caught up, or we'll come back around here. So as I'm doing this, I'm getting some frays and stuff. The tips are not aligned. It looks kind of crappy. You know, it's okay. You won't hurt you'll hurt my feelings. I just won't show it. But but what I'm making sure is that these X marks, or X wraps, where I'm pinning this yarn in, is that they're staying pretty snug, pretty much touching each other. So we'll keep it going. A few more here, and I'm going to go right up to the dumbbell eyes. I'm going to crowd the dumbbell eyes. I'm not going to get anywhere near. Well, that one. I was just talking about how I can do this pretty well, and I jinxed myself. But we're going to crowd the dumbbell eyes, but not the actual, obviously, hook eye. We're not going to put any thread forward of the dumbbells. That one's in there. X wrap, X wrap. 2 wraps. Lock it in. And I don't know, for something like this, Adam, maybe next time we'll do an overhead shot, because this is where most of the magic is on this fly. Yep, you get to buy another camera. I don't do the budget, so that's all on you.
I don't either. Alex, figure out where to put this.
Yep. So there we go. Again, just keeping this going so you can get kind of a shot there for y'all. Again, repetitive, painful, getting this down. I'm going to get at least one more. I'm just going to call it chocolate colored. Oh, we're going to get one more in front of this. Challenge accepted. There's 2. Wiggle it down. This will probably be our last one. So I think I've put 6 of these in. just for general reference. It's whatever it takes to get up to the front. And what's really going to vary the number of pieces of yarn that you're using is just how consistent you are with putting that arm in and how much it takes in that transition area. At this point, if you were going to put a weed guard in, you could do it now, but our tie is pretty much done. So get a whip finish on this baby. I must say I really do like the using of some kind of paint to cover the dumbbell eyes, especially if it's the same color as one of your the carpet yarn. It really kind of blends in, and I'll actually paint the hook eye as well, because obviously the hook itself is going to be bright and shiny, but anything that can just kind of make that crab carapace blend and look all as one, that's a good thing. So yeah, I've got this god awful looking thing right now. There's my claw straight out the back, and we'll need to shape this next. Before I shape it, I'm gonna tease out this yarn. So yeah, you know, we could quote just kind of fish it like that, but we'll come back to the original because we should. Doing apples and oranges here. It's hard. It's like I'm confused. Anyhow, but you can kind of see this has really been teased out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my bodkin to really pull this apart, but I'm going to hang on to this side because yeah, it's tied in, but it's only but so tight right now. So I'll pinch on one side, tease it all out, and then once I've done the major untwisting with the bodkin, then I'll come back with one of the greatest tools that I think you can have is these EP finger brushes. They just get in there and they have the right amount of pressure because they're flexible. And I'll really get after it to try to tease it out. I won't be able to get it all untwisted, but you can really get most of it and achieve the look that we're after. So going back in the vise, nice and secure. And I'll try to do this a little bit to the side for y'all. Just going to start at the back. And again, the length of these doesn't matter because we're going to trim them. And I'm just trying to get the major twists out. There. Another one there. The things we do to catch a fish, right? I mean, sometimes it's just not right. And yeah, there you go. All my ties work because I don't. Yeah, I haven't had a refusal yet. I haven't fished it, but I haven't refused it. And then again, I'm teasing these out. And this is just the rough stuff. You could just go right at it with your like a comb or whatever you got, but that step seems to make this next part a little easier. And I'm gonna get relatively aggressive here. I mean, I'm gonna unleash all my anger on the fly. Again, I'm gonna really pin it, and you can see. I mean, I'm getting after it here, and I highly suspect what Dave Skoke does is all this goodness that I just pulled out.
Dubbing, baby.
He too uses this as dubbing as part of his collar piece, and you can see it there. Maybe different colors or whatever. I'm not going to do that tonight.
They do it with EP fiber.
Yep, and EP works. It's good stuff. This is how this is just the classic strong arm Merkin material.
This is easier than EP.
Yeah, that's way more forgiving. This stuff is.
Yeah, and again, I like it because it's real consistent in the amount that you're putting on. You know.
Oh yeah.
A little bit of practice with EP, you can figure that out. But I just, as long as you don't handle the carpet too much, the little pieces, once you get it and it's kind of untwisted some on you, then it can be a bit of a challenge to really mess with it. But there we go. That is the definition of a bad hair day right there. And when we go to shape this, you're going to want a good pair of scissors. So whatever's your best pair that you hide from your wife and kids, nobody knows about. If you're a fly tyer, you have...
I have a question.
Yeah, you got a question? What is it?
What are we doing with the leftover material?
Yeah, so we're going to do the legs in a second. Fair question. We do have our rubber legs. We're going to do this initial shaping first.
Oh, all right.
And then we're going to put these in. But, you know, fair point, because you're probably thinking, like, hey, shouldn't we been...
Don't usually put the legs in last.
Yeah, usually, like, yeah, wouldn't I be putting these in as I go or something?
Yeah.
And you could, but they kind of get in the way, too, especially this aggressive combing out. But I'm going to show you how another way to get them in there, and to make sure that they're not, like, all over the place, like under the fly and dragging out behind it. It's going to come straight out the sides, which, if you look at, say, the improved Merkin, which doesn't have the claw out the back, you know, you think about the white round rubber legs with the orange tips. They splay out and they're very flat. It's a pretty big feature of the fly. We're going to kind of emulate that. So I'm going to reach over into my secret stash of scissors that if anybody touches them, I'll throw a punch. You can shape this however you want. So, newsflash, if you ever get a strong arm Merkin that I've tied, it's going to have my saliva on it. So one of the first things I'm going to do is I'm going to reach over to this, what we've been calling the transition section, and I'm just going to make it more manageable, no water, whatever, but and so the idea is I just don't want to be trimming that, right? I want to trim just the carpet, and that's it. So, and actually, as I look at mine here, you might notice I've got my light and dark. I should have dark here. It's over here somewhere. It's just kind of hiding on me, or I don't know, it's folded up under or something, but it's there. I'm not going to sweat that too much. When it comes to the shape, in an article that I've read, I know that Dave really likes kind of a football shape. You could make it perfectly round and put a like a dime or a nickel on it. Some people will just do a single line straight cuts. You can do that too. That's a little, in some ways, more repeatable. But what I've kind of come to do is, all right, I'm doing this on the side so y'all can see a little better, is I will put it up against my bead chain, or I'm sorry, my lead, and I'll do a single cut, and then I'll invert it and do the same thing. Ideally, it will be symmetrical, pretty close, and that's fishable right there. But we put all that effort into making that, again, what I call the transition section. So let's kind of reap the benefits of, you know, we don't want a big triangle shape, come back in, and then the claw. So what I like to do is give it that football shape that Dave Skoke talks about. And this is where your good pair of scissors will really come into play. Y'all might have better luck than I, but I've tried curved scissors.
I've never seen them do it like that.
Dave, can you do that inverted? Yeah, perfect.
So it's kind of oblong is what I'd call it, almost football shape, but kind of oblong. And it's not perfectly symmetrical right now. It's pretty close, but we are going to comb this out a little more in a second. But that's a pretty good shape. I mean, that looks like a fly that a permit would refuse. But again, big things I'm looking for is, I don't have any of my, all my carpet yarn is pretty well trimmed. My transition section's looking a little psycho all over the place, but that's okay, because I want it to be, when this fly's on the bottom not moving, I want a little bit of flowy stuff at the base of the claw. So there's movement, sort of, even when it's stationary. So, the question was posed by the gentleman in the back row about the legs. I have a love-hate relationship with rubber legs. To me, I just think they don't look like anything. They're like a caricature, like attribute. They're not real exact. Obviously, there's a lot of patterns that have them. It's just my little hang-up that...
Well, tying shrimp, you always use them.
yeah, you'll have stuff like...
Sitting on the bottom, these things are
Exactly.
still.
Exactly. So the way that we're going to do this is I don't have to evenly space them, but I'm going to pick a spot somewhere near the front of the fly, somewhere in the middle, and towards the rear. And because I have those different colors, it'll be a little easier to see this. So I know everybody flosses every day, but I kind of think about flossing your teeth. I'm going to use this rubber leg, and there's a reason why you might have a couple extra if you break some. And I'm going to go somewhere near the front of my fly here and say right about there. And so now this is sticking out the top, which I don't really want. And so I'm just going to keep it together and roll it to the bottom. So I'm in between a dark and a light, and it's just sitting there like that. And all I'm going to do, and at the top right now, the fly's inverted, so that's the bottom. And I'm just going to do a simple overhand knot. Now this is laying on the bottom. If I just leave it like this, and obviously it's not real secure yet, right? It's a single overhand knot. After 2 false casts, one of them's coming off. We're going to secure it much better than that here in a moment. We're going to put our other 2 in, and then what we're going to do is we're going to position it to come right out through the center of that carpet material, and we'll pull it out some, put a little tiny dab of UV resin, lower it back into the material, and then we'll zap it. And that's how this example here, you see how it's sticking straight out to the sides. This is never going to get hung up underneath the fly. So when you throw this, it will always hook point up and hook point up, and then the legs will stick out every time. There it goes. If I'm not in frame for those online, I'm sorry. But that's the idea. So before we worry about all that, let's get our middle leg in. That's middle enough for government work. Oh wait, not in the government anymore. I made it to the end of the government job. All right. Simple overhand knot. That's good.
That's how you attach this.
Yeah, you missed that question from while you were gone, Adam. But yeah, we're just doing an overhand knot for now.
Beats the crap out of trying to tie them in between clumps of yarn.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those like, it would be nice. There's not going to be a real super convenient way, I would argue. I mean, you're just going to have to at some point take a ride on the rubber leg pain train when you're tying the strong arm merkin like this. Again, so they're all in with an overhand knot, and we can see how they're coming out the bottom. That's garbage. We need to get to where it's fully splayed out. And the way that we're going to do that, it's pretty good. I'm going to do one small trim because I'm not OCD, but I'm pretty close. So I just want that to be there. So before I really start to set these for where they're going to exit out, something I don't do a whole lot is I'm going to use some super glue. In general, I'm not a big fan of super glue and fly tying. There's a couple reasons. Usually there's like a better way to tie stuff in, like we talked about earlier. If you have a pillow of thread, you can compress the thread, hold your eyes in place. The other thing is, I've heard on a podcast that I think it's a cyanoacrylate, and technically it will loosen up in water over time. Maybe not to the point it fully debonds. There are other products like, I got it right here actually, Liquid Fusion is a super glue, but not regular super glue. It's completely resistant to being immersed in water. So what I'm going to do now is on the top of my fly, I've got my rubber legs out of the way, is remember those where we made the X wraps for each piece of bundle of yarn? I'm going to go right down the center of that, and I'm going to give it a fairly healthy dose. Now it goes without saying, if we haven't combed out our yarn yet, then we're obviously permanently putting it in place, or semi-permanently if you subscribe to the super glue may loosen up some over time. I'm going to do the same thing on the bottom, but I want my rubber legs out of the way, so I'm going to make sure that they're pulled down into the yarn there. And I'm going to do the same thing. Super glue the bottom. So we're permanently securing our yarn that we tied in with X-Wraps. It's got a little extra super glue. And all we had was an overhand knot with those rubber legs, crazy legs, whatever you want to call them. And that's how we've secured them. But they're going to be further secured in a moment here. All right, let me get set with my UV resin here that I should have fixed earlier when I talked about my bottle being so low, but I have another one that's brand new. So I should be good now. Just double check. I'm good. I just got set up. All right. I like to work from the top just because I can see top down a little, excuse me, a little better. And I'm going to work from the front of the fly to the back. And I'm really going to finagle this back and forth. It's not going anywhere now that I've super glued it. And I just want to make sure that, yep, it's going to come out through the center of that carpet material or our yarn. Here at Tailwater, if you're interested in some of this yarn, we call it just vintage sparkle yarn, but it's Aunt Lydia's that we referenced earlier. So I'm pulling this out.
10 years ago at a yard sale.
Yeah. So I'm pulling out, I'm stressing it, putting a dot on there, and I'm going to lower the dot back down in. And if I have to, I'll wiggle it around a little bit. But all I really care about is that it's coming straight out the side of the carpet. That one is, and we'll zap it. And so you can even see, compared to its neighbors, it's already behaving a little bit better. All right. And I mean, this is just, the only way to explain it is this is just attention to detail stuff. So if you're one of these people that's like, oh, I got to rush through flies real quick, or I like, all I tie are guide flies, I mean, that's cool. But this pattern is just going to necessitate that level of detail to get it to have all the attributes that, you know, the designer intended. And so I referenced earlier, we had a customer say, hey, I need 18 of these. I need them in a, you know, basically the next day. I left work. The shop closed at 6, and I had to work a little bit during the next day, but I got 18 of them done by 1:30 in the afternoon. And I was turning and burning pretty quick. All right, so that side's done. I say that not to say, look at me, I made 18 strong arm Merkins. I say it to say, you know, most things I could make 18 of them pretty quick, but these guys just take a little bit of time. And some patterns, you know, really lend themselves to some kind of, excuse me, production tying, where you're making a dozen or so at a time. You know, most people aren't making a dozen of flies, but this is one of those flies that if I was going to make 6 of them, I might make all my claws at once or tie the claws on all on at once. But you're really doing individual ties, I think. That one, I'm not quite, I need a tiny bit here on the back side that y'all can't see. You know, not a beginner pattern, not super advanced. There's just a lot of steps that build on one another. So if you're a little frustrated when you're trying these things out, you know, take it in steps. Each thing that you're doing here is a separate skill. You're just bringing a bunch of them to bear at once. All right, so I got my rubber legs tied in, secured in super glue. We've got them coming directly out the sides now, but it still is a bit of a mess. Looks like a wet cat or something right now because of the saliva on there. but you can see they're coming out the sides. And so really all I have to do next is trim them. You know, the length of them is 100% up to you. It looks like Dave Skoke usually does an inch. I've seen where people will do an overhand knot in these to make the claw come out the side and trend back, or come out the side of the carapace back. And it's one little extra tiny detail. Does it matter to the fish? I mean, it might. You know, I've seen a lot of permit patterns that'll do that, but not all. And those of you out there, if you're still watching, first off, God bless you for still watching. And second of all, you won't be able to see this, but on my vise, I have a ruler that's a foot long, and it's got centimeters, whatever those things are, on it as well. But I'm a big fan of repeatability, as I stated somewhat earlier, so I like to just physically measure it out. So an inch, I can make them all exactly an inch. I mean, you can just look and guess too, and if that's your thing, rock on. Go for it. But I know that both sides are going to be an inch. This, you know, hey, this leading one is back a little bit, but there, I've got that splay coming out that we talked about. My crab's not perfectly symmetrical. My excuse is going to be that I was trying to show it to the camera. The reason is I dorked it up a little bit, but it's relatively insignificant. We've got a real rigid claw in the back of it. It's not going anywhere. If you ever feel like it's loosened up, you just need to get that transition material away, hit it with some resin, make sure it's good and stiff before you use it. You can quote me on that. And other than that, that is what I've got for y'all tonight. Strong arm Merkin, and somewhere around here I threw my flats worm. Great little redfish fly, great in a light color bonefish triggers as well, and then a classic permit pattern.